My Adventures with Superman was back again this week on Adult Swim for what might be its biggest episode of the season so far. That episode was entitled The Machine That Would Be Empire, and in case you didn't already know, I'm Cape Joel, and this is the video series where I give my thoughts and feelings on the episode that was, while also shouting out any comic book Easter eggs or references I can find. So with that out of the way, let's get into it, shall we? So then, picking up directly after the events of last week's show, Clark was kidnapped by his cousin Kara, who was revealed to actually be a much more sinister version of this character than anyone possibly could have considered. Naturally, Superman wants no part of whatever it is Kara is selling and wants nothing more than to get back to Earth. Unfortunately, he has no idea where Earth is, so it looks like he's going to have to rock with his cousin for a little bit longer until he can make a proper escape. He also kind of is interested in the idea of possibly meeting her father, which Clark naturally assumes must be his uncle Zor-El, right? Kara also very much thinks she can still get Clark on her side. If only he knew the true greatness of the Kryptonian Empire at its prime, maybe he would join her in conquest after that. Luckily for her, Kara has some high-tech, state-of-the-art alien virtual reality that allows Clark to relive past moments in history. Clark is impressed at what he sees of his birth planet, but right away massive holes start to form in Kara's story and recollection of Krypton. For one, she talks about it like she lived there when we all know that's impossible, because much like Kal-El, she was spirited away from the doomed planet as a baby. Hell, she doesn't even know the names of any other Kryptonians, yet she militaristically clings to these virtual memories for dear life and uses them as justification for her belief in Kryptonian supremacy. It's also made pretty clear pretty early on that this whole tough girl act Kara is doing might just be a defense mechanism. As Clark learns, Kara has been keeping little trinkets from every planet she's visited, including Earth, a fact of which she actively keeps secret from her father. One of these trinkets just so happens to be a photo of Jimmy, which Clark thinks is just the sweetest darn thing, and you know what? He's 100% correct. Also, if you're a mega comic fan like me, you will know all the planets that Kara mentions in this episode are totally from the books. There's Euphorex, a planet that's pretty unremarkable on its own, but it comes from the pages of Omega Men, the very same book that Lobo, the famous Zarnian bounty hunter, comes from. There's also Hyven, home to Chip, the cartoon chipmunk of the Green Lantern Corps and his whole woodland critter race. In fact, this will actually end up being just the first of two massive Green Lantern references in this episode. And of course, who could forget Thanagar, home to the Hawk people, including Katar and Shaira Hull, Hawkman and Hawkwoman, respectively. Well, you know, when they're not being reincarnated, but you know, the Hawks are a whole other kettle of fish. While Kara desperately tries to sell Clark on the greatness of the Kryptonian Empire, I dig he also tries to sell her on the beauty and worth of planet Earth, especially his parents, Ma and Pa Kent. Of course, Kara can't see any of that, assuming that Clark's time on Earth has left him soft in the head and weak in the body. So much to the point she figures maybe actually seeing a planet brought into the Kryptonian Empire's fold will be enough to prove to Clark her way of thinking is the correct one. Of course, to get to one of these planets, they're going to need to clear a bunch of space junk. And it's right around here My Adventures with Superman decides to wade into a major debate amongst comic book fans, and that is, does Superman need a suit or a helmet to breathe when out in space? Because depending on the era in comics and who's writing the stories, he hasn't always needed one. The show puts its foot down pretty unanimously and says no, Superman can breathe in space whenever he wants to. All he had to do was give it a try, which he was understandably afraid to do right off the jump. What follows from there is actually my favorite part of the episode, maybe my favorite thing in the season so far. You see, when it looks like Kara might be hurt, Superman ends up activating another one of the powers he learned well on Earth. This shocks Kara beyond belief because despite being bred for war and conquest, she can't actually do any of this stuff. In fact, she really relies on a lot of tech to enhance her powers. To me, this is just some genius writing, because what it's saying here without many words is that Clark's time on Earth didn't make him weaker or softer, quite the opposite. It made him a better person and by extension a more Superman. After all, it was his connections to his friends, his city, to trying to help people. That's the whole reason that he even learned that stuff in the first place, by digging deeper than he ever thought possible. Deeper than any warmonger or conqueror ever possibly could. Now, when the duo actually make it to Thanagar, they're both shocked to see the world as a barren wasteland, not a thriving part of a new Kryptonian empire like Kara kept saying. But here's the twist, Kara is just as shocked as anyone, again showing that she's been an unreliable narrator this whole time, and the reason why we learn in very short order as Superman and his cousin are brought before Kara's father, Primus Brainiac, who in this show we discover was once the supercomputer system that ran the Kryptonian war machine before they were wiped out by a mysterious foe. Now that's very interesting as far as interpretations go for Brainiac for several reasons. One, in terms of visuals, this is easily the most inhuman and mechanical looking version of Brainiac I think we've gotten maybe ever. Usually he either looks like a man-machine, or he's just straight up a green-skinned alien from another planet called Kalu. As far as origins and motivations go, we've certainly seen versions of Brainiac like this in other media, where Brainiac is a rogue Kryptonian creation. What I find interesting, though, is that this version actually seems to be devoid of his classic gimmick, that being stealing and bottling alien cities in order to steal their knowledge. At least, that doesn't seem to be what's up as of right now, but that could always change. Hell, as far as I can tell, this version of Brainiac is just straight up destroying whole planets full stop, not bringing them into empires, not trying to enslave them, just wiping them all out and then lying to Kara about it. In fact, hey, let's talk about that for a minute. Brainiac being a twisted father figure to Kara is actually pretty damn compelling as far as change goes, as in the book, Supergirl often hated Brainiac more than Superman because he was the one who stole and bottled the Kryptonian city of Kandor. Brainiac, as we learn, is also very fascinated by Superman's new powers, and as such seeks to try and test him with a combat gauntlet featuring the captured consciousness of several aliens Brainiac has killed over the years, including some really awesome deep cuts. We get an actual straight-up Green Lantern, one of the famous galactic peacekeeping corps, which also makes me wonder, geez, are we ever going to see Toma Ray in this show? He was the Green Lantern who was actually supposed to be looking over the part of space that Krypton is in. But it doesn't stop there, because we also get treated to a parademon, one of Darkseid's foot soldiers, which honestly further strengthens my own personal theory that Krypton got wiped out in a war with Planet Apocalypse. And lastly, we have a Thanagarian hawk person. These fights are clearly very taxing on Clark, as we see him really have to fight for his life and use tactics that he might consider overly violent or brutal. Also, when Clark is on the ropes, his super aura becomes electric blue, which I have to wonder, is that a sly little reference to Electric Blue Superman from the comics? Superman survives his test, but refuses to serve Brainiac as a weapon. Not that he's gonna take no for an answer in this situation. After all, with the right amount of red sunlight and brainwashing, Kara has been made to serve, so assuredly he can do the same to Clark, right? Though, seemingly the brainwashing might not be nearly as good as Brainiac thought it was, because after only one day of hanging out with her cousin, Kara is beginning to question everything she knows in her life so far, and after checking on all the planets she's visited in the past, Kara is hit with the horrifying revelation that she was the one who actually destroyed these planets in the first place. Ooh. And goddamn, can we talk about that for a second? What a dramatic gut punch. This poor young woman whose race was destroyed has now been brainwashed, manipulated, and gaslit into destroying more civilizations for Brainiac. That is some dark, dark stuff. Oh, and nice touch too when we see the Thanagarian tapestry talking about how Kara destroyed their entire civilization. It's clearly meant to look a little like Egyptian hieroglyphics because the Hawk people actually have their own interesting connection to Earth's Egypt and reincarnation. Thankfully, after all those crazy twists and turns, this episode does end with a little light at the end of the tunnel, as Lois and Jimmy have managed to make their way to space with the help of the returning Brain and Monsieur Mallah. And so that was the machine that would be Empire, and man, I gotta say, my adventures with Superman just moves from strength to strength. I thought the episode that preceded it was pretty heavy and pretty dark, but man, this one comes out and really lets the audience have it with both barrels. While also still very much remembering to focus on what exactly it is that makes Superman Superman. He's not a conqueror. He's not a warmonger, he's a superhero. He protects people, but had things gone differently, he very well could have ended up like his cousin Kara. This episode also really opens up the universe of my adventures with Superman in a ton of super cool and interesting ways. We know Apocalypse is out there, we know the Green Lantern Corps is out there. Is destroying these planets actually Brainiac's plan, or is there something more sinister happening under the surface? Furthermore, is the version of of Krypton that Kara has been shown by Brainiac actually true? Or is there more to that story as well? I don't know, but I'm certainly excited to find out. But until then, everyone, that'll just about do it for me. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I always appreciate it. Thank you so much for all the kind comments, and hey, be sure to follow me on social media so you always know when a new My Adventures with Superman video is dropping. Also, looks like this is going to end up being a really great summer for animated reviews here on the channel. We got Kite Man Hell Yeah dropping in July and Batman the Caped Crusader dropping in August, so be sure to stick around for those too.